Amanda Edwards, why are you running for the 18th?
You know, we are standing in an unprecedented moment in our country where we've got a president who doesn't believe in the rule of law, who has fought against healthcare, education, economic stability. And I believe we need someone in place who will be unafraid for fighting what's right, but also someone with a bold vision for our future. And someone who can put into place systems that work for people. When I was growing up, about 10 years old, my father got diagnosed with something called multiple myeloma, which is a very aggressive form of cancer that took his life when I was a teenager. But I'll never forget the conversations that we'd have. I remember asking my father what would happen if the insurance companies, what if they said no to his life-saving treatments? And I remember my father just answering me and said, by way of saying, well, we just have to figure something else out. And I knew then that that was the wrong answer, just like I know that it's the wrong answer now. And that the truth of the matter is we need people in office who understand that real lives are hanging in the balance of the decisions we make, the systems we create or choose not to create each and every single day as leaders. And we need people who are going to be willing and courageous enough to put people over the politics that they see. And that's something I think that gets traded off far too often. And we need someone in place who is going to be committed to that purpose and mission, but also who has the experience to be able to deliver those results.
Talk to us about some of those experiences that you would bring ready day one if elected to the 18th.
Yeah, so the role of Congress, a lot of people don't necessarily know what that means and what that is. There are several things that you do in that role. One, you respond to the things that your constituents call your office about. Two, you have the opportunity to help with making legislation, passing policy. There's the policy piece of it. There's the advocacy piece, so using that bully pulpit and convening people, large groups, persuading people to go in a certain direction. And then also there is the funding component. A lot of what you do, as they say, is bring home the bacon. And I am the only candidate in the race that has the experience on all of those categories that will make me ready on day one. Not only am I from this district and have a unique perspective on it, having been in the district and my family for generations, but I also have experience and skills that connect to this role. Specifically, I had the opportunity to serve as a public finance attorney. Years ago, I started my practice and doing that, learned how to connect public resources to public projects. And of course, that uniquely prepares me for the public funding piece of this job. Separate, I had the opportunity to serve as one of the at-large city council members, representing 2.3 million Houstonians. And in my journey, got a chance to really appreciate and see where the federal policy was disconnected from what was needed on the ground. When it came to things like disaster recovery, I was on the ground seeing what the disconnects were when it comes to disaster recovery policy and what is needed from residents versus what we have today. It does you no good for somebody to tell you a year later that they're going to buy out your street after you've spent your life savings or use the insurance proceeds. It would have been nice to know those types of things from a policy perspective well before that. It does you no good to be someone who qualifies for the help that is needed, but is arbitrarily denied. Again, these are things that I witnessed and experienced and helped residents navigate through as a city council member. Finally, I will say, as it relates to constituent services, being present, being a part of the community, there is no other candidate that has been as active, present, and of course collaborative with the residents of the community in the ways that I have been, whether it's rebuilding housing because of what I've witnessed and seen in terms of disaster recovery, or taking the lead on issues like technology and innovation, where we started the Tech and Innovation Task Force for the city, which of course resulted in the Innovation District being built and a tenfold increase in venture capital investment in our community for startups. These are deliverables and receipts, as some say, of the things that I've been able to accomplish for the community, demonstrating my ability to get things done.
With the roots you have in the district,
Yes.
in the 18th, what would you say are three of the greatest challenges facing it today?
Oh, well, first of all, let's back up on the fact that we've not had representation for far too long. If you do the math from Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee getting sick, passing away, Congressman Turner passing away, the delay in the special election, and probably a delayed runoff for the special election, we're talking about a period of 18 months where the 800,000 people who live here haven't had a vote, haven't had a voice, haven't had their federal advocate for funding. So I'll start with the funding piece, because you can't move, it used to be called earmarks in the past, now they're called community impact grants. Those don't move without a voting member. So you got to think about, and I have these conversations on a regular basis. We've got not only the residents that live here, but we have institutions like University of Houston, Texas Southern, the Intercontinental Airport, that don't have a federal advocate for funding right now, and have it. And once this 18-month period has been completed, it's too long. So we've got a lot of missed time to make up for. So I'll be starting with making sure that we're making the requisite investments in infrastructure that is needed here, but also a wider variety of things, transportation investment, just a variety of things that we've been missing out on by not having our voting member in place. In addition to that, I'll be focusing on healthcare access. You know, the source of the government shutdown as we speak is healthcare. My why for why I'm committed to putting people over politics and really being about change for this community stems from my father's healthcare journey. And so in looking at healthcare, that is pivotal to start there, and of course touches on the lives of so many people within the district. And then finally, I'll address economic stability. That's an arena that of course has been in a really challenging moment, in that the president has been implementing tariffs and destabilizing the economy in the way that so many of our most vulnerable and others have such great uncertainty right now. What's going to happen with Social Security? What's going to happen to my retirement benefits? People ask often when we talk to people in the district. They're worried, they're concerned. It used to be some things that we could take for granted and think that surely these benefits won't go away entirely, but we're in a different era and we're in a different moment in this time, and so we need folks who are going to be focused on that. But as we're focusing on the challenges and what's been taken away, we've got to do something I call walking and chewing gum, which means you've got to deal with the problems, but you also have to still forge a path forward for the future. And part of that means, how do we get resources to our small businesses that often lack access to capital and the ability to scale their businesses? Finding ways to start moving dollars in the directions that lend at greater rates to those that have had challenges historically is something that I'm committed to doing as a congressional member. Also finding ways to help stimulate housing in our community. We've got a housing crisis in Houston right now, and so how do we start moving dollars into this region in a way that reduces some of the disparities when it comes to the access to affordable housing in our community? When I was on council, I had the opportunity to serve on what's called the National League of Cities Board of Directors. And in that service, I had the opportunity to advocate for and to prevent CDBG dollars from being cut across the country to cities all over the place, which would have had huge implications when it comes to housing, huge implications when it comes to economic development as well. So these are some of the things that I would prioritize once elected as the next Congresswoman.
You mentioned the government shutdown. If you were in Congress right now, would you support the move by Democrats in the House?
Yes, I mean, healthcare, as I mentioned, you don't have anything if you don't have your health. And that is of paramount importance. We already have too many Americans that are uninsured in our country. And then to move into the direction where we knowingly make healthcare less affordable and cost prohibitive, I think is the wrong move to make. And right now we continue to see that the administration is continuing to play with people's lives. And I do think that it was wise it's an unfortunate set of circumstances, don't get me wrong. Without a question, there are ramifications to having a government shutdown, and we don't take that lightly. But at the very same time, where does the line get drawn? And healthcare has to be the space and place where Democrats stand up. And of course, we fight for the rights of people over these politics. And right now, you're seeing the politics win out over people.
What way do you think it is to get through the noise to reach some way of reopening the government. What do you think can be done in Congress right now to do so?
We've got to fix the Affordable Care Act. The subsidies that were being made available need to be extended. Again, as I mentioned, we already have too many people who don't have access to health care, decent and enough health care. So to go in the other direction, we're going to be creating a different crisis. And so it doesn't just get rid of it. It doesn't just disappear. You've got to deal with the issue head on. And I think we've got to start opening up the conversation on how is it that we would be able to sustain these Affordable Care Act incentives that allow people to access it on an affordable level. Because right now, that's the crux of the issue, and we've got to move forward.
People say they want members of Congress to work together. I think the government shutdown's a way of seeing where sides have been kind of buried in the ground and their foot buried in the ground. If elected, how would you bridge that gap there or find consensus when it helps the members of the 18th or the residents of the 18th?
You know, I will use an example unique to us that is Houston's own, and that is flooding. I have never met a single Democrat or a single Republican that likes to flood. I've not met one yet. And I think that is going to be the space and place. We're in the middle of hurricane season with no one in the 18th Congressional District seat. This is an opportunity for us to figure out a way to come together and be effective when it comes to infrastructure investment, when it comes to disaster recovery systems. We've heard the president talk about how FEMA needs to go away, how states and local governments should be responsible for funding their own disaster relief instead of the federal government. We know how irresponsible and reckless that would be in terms of, having a huge adverse effect on our community as well as many others. California, for example, they have their wildfires, and we've been watching people get letters that say they've been dropped from their insurance. Houston, we've seen large insurers pulling out of the market. Florida's having similar issues. Louisiana has similar issues. There are ways in which we can be coming together in spaces that help to support better a federal solution for the issue of insurance and also in terms of disaster recovery funding. We've got to do a more efficient and better job of getting the resources where they need to go when they need to get there, and then having the policy put into place in a timely fashion so that it actually works for people as opposed to against people. Right now, a lot of what you endure when you're in a position of crisis like we've endured, of course Harvey being the biggest one, you see that the system is set up to prevent fraud and waste, but it's not set up to help facilitate people getting the assistance they need. And those two things are not mutually exclusive. You can have a focus on results, you can have a focus on helping people and at the same time. And I think that that's one thing that we've got to retool and think about differently when it comes to this. I've seen too many people, I've been to too many homes, we've canvassed hundreds of homes, we mobilized hundreds of volunteers. When I learned that a lot of our seniors were not getting the help that they needed in the aftermath of Harvey, and learned so many terrible stories and saw so many terrible things. In fact, one woman in particular, we had to get a New York Times article written about her because of FEMA having arbitrarily denied her resources. Everybody else was getting them, but some kind of way the flood missed her house. And we of course knew that was not true. I almost fell through the floor of her home. And yet and still, it was an arbitrary denial until that New York Times piece came out and the funds appeared within days. These are the things that we should not have as a disaster system, our disaster recovery system. We've got to have a system that works for everybody, that's consistent, fair, and is effective at helping people to fully recover.
So day one, you'd work across the aisle on a flooding bill or some sort of disaster relief bill. Disaster
recovery and infrastructure funding. So the infrastructure funding component of this is also just preventative as well. So we're not just talking about in response to when a storm comes, because guess what? That's too late. I say this all the time. We can't stop it from raining, but we can be prepared to catch it when it does. So we as policymakers need to be thinking about the next flood 24/7, whether there are cameras there or not, whether there's water in front of you or not. Our job is to make sure that we're putting in the requisite investment to keep people safe. And I don't know anybody who wouldn't want to have those investments made in our Texas delegation. So I do think that is a great starting point to start funneling resources, especially the resources we've been missing out on as a result of the vacancy. Second, in terms of disaster recovery overhaul, absolutely I would be looking at ways in which we can overhaul the full system. It doesn't work for us. It also doesn't work for other people. I've talked to folks across the nation in different disaster types, which is how I'm coming to the conclusion that there is some synergy there in a national set of reforms.
So going to a viewer question we got on Facebook. Without sounding prejudiced, the late Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee never had any meetings concerning her other constituents. Will you address the whole district?
100%. This is a district that has, the wide spread of Houstonians represented within it. We are a very fortunate community where we have such diversity. In the city of Houston, 142 languages are spoken. And so the 18th Congressional District also takes a large chunk of that diverse, rich constituency and brings them together. My goal is to represent all 789,000 members of this community. Whether you speak a different language, whether you voted for me or not, whether you have been engaged in politics or not, it doesn't matter. My goal is to represent everyone in a way that creates a community where every single person in it, no matter what their background, no matter what part of town, has the opportunity not just to get by day to day, but my goal is for everyone to be able to thrive every day. So having the systems that work, having the policies that make sense, and having a responsive constituent response service available to them. These are the things that will help create a community that reaches its full potential, and that's my goal and responsibility as the next Congresswoman for the 18th Congressional. So I will be in whatever part of the area. We also will be doing things proactively. For example, I want to democratize the community impact grant process. I want people to know that they can apply, local entities to apply, different demographics to know that those funds are available. And because it's important. It's important to have them be able to compete for it and potentially get those resources in order to help uplift this community. So I will not just, talk to the majority of one population and not to another. I have, as my campaign has demonstrated, we've had events in the East End, we've had events in Fifth Ward, we've gone all over the district. Then we've had things on the South Side. We will be everywhere in the district because it requires that. And I have had the experience, fortunately, of having to serve a large swath of area in geography, having been an at-large city council member covering 650 square miles of the city, and knowing that not everybody in the city was your supporter, but that does not influence how you represent them.
You mentioned voter engagement there. How do you get more people to engage and show up for this election in a matter of weeks?
Well, part of it is making sure people know some of the most fundamental aspects of this, which is what are the boundaries? There's a lot of confusion that has stemmed from the fact that we've had this redistricting take place in the summer of 2025, and now, of course, it's a November 4th, 2025 special election. Now, people often say when we knock doors, when we call, am I still in the district? And that's a logical question. The redistricting does not apply to the special election. It only applies to the midterm election in 2026, in March of 26, that's the midterm. That is when the newly drawn maps would apply if they withstand this court challenge that is currently underway. If they don't, that's a whole different conversation. But if they do withstand that challenge, that is when those maps would apply. Notwithstanding all of that, the 2025 special election is to fill the unexpired portion of the term that was being served by Congressman Sylvester Turner. So that means you're stepping into his shoes by way of whatever the original maps were when he got elected. So these are the 2024 maps. If you voted in 24, you vote the same way in 25. And that's how this boundary will work. It's going to be the same footprint as 2024, your existing footprint. And it's not until the midterm election elections when you'll see a shift in boundaries if those maps withstand the court challenges. That's been a huge source of confusion for a lot of people. I'll say another. A lot of people got the message that Governor Abbott had delayed calling the special election. However, they didn't hear the message when he finally did. And so some people are of the impression that there's an election going on, but they don't realize that that special election is happening in a matter of, early vote is happening in a matter of days. And they're not understanding that. So we're doing our best to get that messaging out because that's critical. So those are two of the major obstacles I think that people have internalized and have the wrong impression about, that we are doing our best with our messaging to make sure we clear up. We're texting people, we're calling people, we're showing up at doorsteps, all of the normal, the normal things that you do in a campaign. In addition to running our ads, we have our date on our ad of when the election is, so people know it's not for the midterm in 2026. So it's subtle things of that nature that will help people to be more informed about their ability to participate. And I just want to take a step back for a moment. In addition to those kind of tactical things that I just described, there's a broader and a bigger picture issue that I think we have to also address, and that is we have found that we have a large contingent of people who I would consider non-voting. We saw in the presidential cycle when Kamala Harris did not win the presidency that millions of people who otherwise were likely Democratic voters stayed at home. Now, some of that, of course, could be attributed to things like racism, sexism, differences in opinions on certain policy issues, but some of it can be attributed to the concern for some, which is, why should I vote if nothing ever changes here? And so I think that this election is also about restoring people's confidence that it does matter if you vote, because you're going to be able to now elect someone who has a track record of delivering real change, who does what they say they're going to do. We have got to get out of the business of over-promising and under-delivering when it comes to the campaign trail and how you govern. You've got to make those things sync up. What you say is what got to be what you do. And in this race, I am the person who has a long track record of not being in the business of over-promising and under-delivering, instead over-delivering and delivering the results that our community deserves to see. And that's, I think, really important too in terms of connecting people to this election process. People have to know that it matters. People have to know that it's going to impact their lives in a real way. And so by way of having a candidate like me who has a real track record of impacting and improving communities and people's lives in real ways, I think that's exactly one of the things that will help restore faith in the government again and bring some folks back into the fold. We don't want them staying in that non-voter category.
You mentioned redistricting.
Yes.
Come March is the primary. Do you, for the new maps, as we have to mention, because there is a lot going on here, the elephant in the room is whether Congressman Al Green will run. If elected, do you plan on running for re-election?
So my history with this seat is also unusual. As you might recall, I started off in the mayor's race and was a front runner in that race when Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee decided that she wanted to come home and serve as mayor. I then pivoted into the 18th Congressional District race and was the front runner. Congresswoman Jackson Lee wasn't successful in her bid for mayor and then decided to refile for the 18th congressional seat. She won in the primary against me, and just a few months after, unfortunately, passed away from pancreatic cancer. Due to that, the timing of her death, we then had a precinct chair selection process in which Congressman Sylvester Turner won by 4 votes. He beat me by 4 votes. So I have been and deeply, deeply committed to serving this district, whether it's a nail-biting 4 votes or not. I have been someone who has been tested, who has persevered, who has demonstrated that she has grit, and who is committed to serving the needs of this district. And so that, with that in mind, I think that has been unwavering, and it will continue to be unwavering. Whether the lines have been drawn, I have not been drawn out of the district as it relates to the midterm, but I also know that at this point in time it's critical that we run one race at a time. And right now, my focus is on the 789,000 people who have not had a vote, a voice, or anybody to push down federal funding for them in an 18-month period when this is all said and done. That is where my attention is most needed at this moment in time, but never has my commitment to the 18th Congressional District been in question or wavered, and it will not.
Kind of TikTok viewer question.
Okay.
What are you going to do about homelessness in the area?
You know, I actually went to a meeting yesterday on this very topic. You know, you have obviously various levels of government, and a lot of your policies concerning homelessness stem from decisions that are made at the local level, your cities. But there is a huge piece of this, which is federal funding. And what do you have resources in to do? And so one of the things that we can make sure that we are providing and making available and being advocates for is the influx of more CDBG dollars for housing, and in this case transitional housing. And when I was on city council, we embraced the model of housing first is what it's called, and so we believe in putting people into safe space so that they can then get back on their feet. And so trying to get them housed was a priority. There are various philosophies you can have around homelessness, but I thought that that was a good way to approach it, is to focus on housing first. And as a federal partner, I will be putting the money where our mouth is, and that is by putting the resources in place to provide the grant funds, the loans, the things that are needed to build new and additional housing resources for our unhoused population right now.
SNAP benefits in Texas will change across the country really in a matter of days here on November 1st. Many people probably aren't aware of that after the passage of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. If a member of Congress, how would you or what would you do, if anything, about the changes in SNAP benefits?
Well, first of all, you know, just take a step back. Again, this is another example of politics being played with people's lives. Had we called the special election in a timely fashion, which would have been May the 3rd, I could have been the vote to block the Big Beautiful Bill from even passing. That's that $900 billion in Medicaid cuts, the $300 billion in SNAP benefit cuts. Those are the things that are going to have devastating effects, particularly in a district like the 18th Congressional District, because we have a disproportionately higher number of people who consume those benefits and resources. So we have got to now be very, very vigilant on trying to find alternative sources for nutrition and funding in an era where funding to nonprofits and others are also being cut. And so this is creating, I think, a crisis of epic proportions, because when you create a situation where people don't have access to food, when people don't have access to health care, the basic necessities, then you create desperation. You create desperation, then of course you see other things happen like crime, because people now are going to act out of desperation. We have to counteract that by finding alternative sources of funding to help support those that still need resources and funding support. So that is something I'm going to be working with the state to do, working on the federal side to do. It's not going to be directly reversing course on SNAP as a matter of course, but we'll find clever ways to get resources funneled down that will achieve the same objective. And that's what we're going to have to do. It may have another name, but it will achieve the same goal, because we cannot have a huge population of people who are not only, you know, without health care, but also without nutrition. That would be creating a disaster for not only this generation, but the generations to come. So I will be committed to doing that.
Right? Anything you can think of?
Every candidate is different, but what do you say is your strong point, and how will you use that strong point that you hold to make a difference for the 18th?
Yes, I would have to say I'm the people's candidate. You know, I am not an establishment candidate by any means in this race. I am a person that you can believe the line of accountability is between me and the public that I serve, and that is it. That means that you not only have access to me, but you will get the results. I will not be trading anyone's interests in the interest of political advancement. I will do what is right by the community and be effective at it. I bring a unique set of skills. I mentioned the finance piece. That's a huge part of what you do in Congress, is bring home the bacon to your area. But separate from that, policy making and having been in council when some of the worst disasters in our history have taken place also gives me a unique preparedness for this role, to be ready on day one should disaster strike, and also be ready on day one when it comes to putting the right policies in place to make sure that we are putting our residents in the best position possible to be able to thrive.
And a last question here. What's a random fact you think people in the 18th don't know about you?
Probably how much I like ice cream. I don't know. I don't think they know that. I'm a connoisseur of ice cream and gelato. It's my little guilty pleasure.
What flavor?
Well, it depends, but I like various flavors, pralines and cream. It depends on who I'm getting it from, but pralines and cream, vanilla. I tend to try to keep it in that family. Sweet cream, dulce de leche, butter pecan. I like all of those.
You're not joking.
Oh.
There's no joke here.
I really do like ice cream. So yeah, that's my little fun fact.
Amanda Edwards, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much.